Get the ball rolling. Well, first of all, hi everyone. Thanks for signing up and logging on to our Trusted Tech Talk. Massive thanks to Dmitry for leading this talk and Q&A. Unfortunately, unlike quite a few that we've done in the past, can't provide the beers and pizza, but I think we'll make do. So just a brief overview about me. I'm one of the co-organisers here at Trusted Tech Talks with a specialist background in root-cause software development. The idea for this actually came from speaking to multiple thought leaders and senior managers across the industry, similar to Dmitry, who've had similar pain points, what makes a great Polyglot developer, and how important is the problem-solving aspects of development. We're in for a great presentation, I'm sure. I'll hand over to Dmitry to present on this topic. We'll run a Q&A afterwards. As mentioned on the chats below, we'll be using the Slido app, so I hope everyone has downloaded it and has a pin ready. If not, feel free to download it now by the App Store. That's Slido, S-L-I-D-O, and the pin is 45905. So the code's in the comments below. Using the app, everyone can ask the questions. People can like those questions, put as many questions as you want in there. Those with the most likes will get answered towards the end, and we'll hopefully get some good insight onto it. As an FYI, the session will be recorded, just so we can share it with everyone afterwards, including those who aren't able to attend but have shown interest. Attendees, by the way, won't be visible on the webinar recording, only the speakers will. We'll also be providing a white paper covering all the key highlights, distributed afterwards, and at the end of the webinar, a feedback form should automatically pop up. It'd be great if as many of you as possible could fill it in. Just takes a minute and helps us really shape and create more valuable webinars and events in the future. So without any further delay, I'm delighted to introduce Dmitry Kmita, leader, influencer, problem solver, and currently the software engineering manager at Moonpig. So thanks a lot, and take it away.
Right, 1 second. I hope you can see my presentation and not something inappropriate. Cool. Hi, everyone. So thanks for joining today's session. I really hope you'll find it useful. Today, we're going to talk about how people build their careers and specifically where they focus in the beginning of their journey and in the end of their journey, whereas there is no end of the journey, you just continue learning. So being polyglot and learning as much technology as possible, or focus more on a problem-solving aspect and not necessarily knowing all technologies, and that's going to be probably the big question for today. I have no plans to present a lot because I want to give you kind of the opportunity to ask questions and make my evening more difficult and uncomfortable. So before we start talking about the topic itself, I'm going to talk a bit about myself. So as you've already heard, I'm Dmitry. I've been 12 years in engineering, and specifically 5 years focusing on engineering leadership and management. So when I started working in engineering, I was pretty much sure that I want to grow my career in big companies. So obviously I've started at small companies and then kind of grew myself to bigger and bigger and bigger companies. The last ones were the US retail group with more than 500 people. Then I worked at rental cars with more than 1,000 people. Then I worked at Booking.com where they have around 17,000 people. And then something went wrong. Actually not wrong. I just realized that the amount of impact and change you can make doesn't necessarily correlate with size of the company. So now I work at Moonpig.com, which has less than 300 people. Just generally about myself, I love traveling. I've covered 20 countries, I think, a bit more than 20 countries. Not a massive amount, but just still love traveling. I also run side business where I still code and practice with all the new technology, so I'm still geeky, not fully into management. And probably the most important is that I used to be a massive polyglot. And that's why this topic is so close to me. I am on LinkedIn and I am on Medium, so feel free to connect. If you have any questions outside of this webinar, feel free to connect and ask any. I'm happy to answer those. And again, I don't want to go into boring topics. I want to start with a fun fact. So in Switzerland, it's illegal to own just one guinea pig. So if you ever decide to move to Switzerland and you love guinea pigs, you'll have to at least buy 2, because there is a law in Switzerland which says that guinea pigs are very social animals. And by buying one, they are considered victims of abuse. So yeah, interesting. Right, now we're gonna go and talk about the topic. So just gonna give you a brief explanation how things work when companies do hire. It's going to be probably more useful for non-managers today in this audience, but it's just going to give you a brief explanation. What is the thought process from a business perspective when we hire? So when I need an engineer, the first question I'm going to ask myself as a manager, as a hiring manager, is why? And there's always why. You know, like companies rarely are charity companies that just want to hire thousands of people and not give them any job to do, just let them chill out, drink coffee, etc. There is always a reason why a company is hiring more people. It could be project specific, usually goes with contractors because you have a specific project that needs to be delivered. You don't expect those people to work for longer than that, so you hire contractors. It could be domain growth. So company is growing, domain is growing, so you obviously need to split that ownership to more teams, to more individuals, to more engineers, so you just naturally grow and hire more people. Or there could be a delivery pace. You want to increase delivery pace. The only way you can increase delivery pace, either making your current employees slaves and make them work 24/7, which probably is not rational in 2020. That's why plan B is to hire more people. These are kind of the main reasons why companies hire, around why they hire. And then you ask yourself, if you realize there is a reason why you need to hire, you go with who. And today, let's talk about, I need to hire a senior engineer. I know exactly the technical stack that I need for this candidate to know. Let's say it's Java. I have Go CD pipelines and all my infrastructure is in AWS. So I need to make sure that the candidate knows this stuff. Like anything else is great, but these are 3 core things I would expect that candidate to know. And my company is in retail sector, so any experience in retail would be beneficial, especially if that's IT experience in retail sector. So that's an example. What is my thought process when I hire? And this is where probably the most interesting part comes in. So the first thing is value. And when I say value, I mean how much value will this engineer candidate bring? It may sound harsh, but again, every employee has revenue and investment. I mean, it doesn't only mean how much work you do, but also what impact you make. So you can multiply company performance just by impacting the practices, building a culture, which I'm going to talk a bit later. But yeah, the main idea keeps the same. You're not going to hire a person in a company which doesn't bring you revenue from not just money perspective, but from impact perspective. So the question is, what can you add to the business? And what business is? Business makes money. How does business make money? By solving their customer problem. see the pattern, right? Like company solves problems for their customers, and that's why they need people to solve company problems to do so. And as you all know, time is money. So if we're going to talk into a very simplified formula, the success is profits minus cost. So if the business can increase profits, let's say increasing price will affect conversion, so it doesn't make sense anymore, business starts cutting costs. That's exactly the reason why most businesses tend to solve problems in most sustainable and simple ways, not just because they're lazy, it's just because it's the best revenue on investment. And simplification is the key here, because all simple is relatively quick to build. Plus, simple is easy to extend and maintain. So let's rephrase the value a bit. When I hire, I think about how much sustainable long-term value can candidate add. Not touching problem solving and Polyglot yet. So next bit is culture, which I mentioned before. So culture is super important, and culture is completely built by people. So every person makes an impact. Therefore, I always ask myself, would this candidate make a positive impact on our team and business culture? And would this candidate even enjoy it? Because don't get me wrong, culture sometimes just personal culture, the culture that person lives with, and the company culture may not match. So this candidate may not just be right fit for this company. So the next bit is growth. And here are we getting a bit more to this polyglot versus problem-solving person and attitude in general. So one of my responsibility as a line manager is to provide a clear and transparent career growth for all my direct reports. And it's much easier for me to do so when candidate knows exactly where their focus is, instead of I want to know everything. Because if I know exactly where a person wants to grow, specific technology, specific area of technology, I can help them. When I get a polyglot in the team, every time I ask a question, what do you learn today? The answer is going to be different. I had a great example of a direct report I had who was changing his focus every single week. And in few months working in my team, he came to me and said, oh, actually, I want to go into fintech. And I was like, whoa, like completely different area, completely different focus, and like different technologies, different mindset. Like, why? And just because this person is a complete polyglot, he has always been kind of learning new technologies, learning new languages, learning new markets. I mean, that's great, but you lose the focus, and there is only limited amount of energy you can put into that focus. So it makes it really difficult for you to progress in one area. So, and for me as a line manager, it's going to be really difficult to build a transparent career path for a polyglot. I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but that would be more difficult. So the next bit is risk. And it's an interesting one. So I had an example in one of the companies I worked for where I hired a super academic person. I literally have no idea how his brain works, because he managed to answer literally any question I had to him. Like crazily smart guy. He was a doctor of computer science. He always asked me to call him doctor. Don't know why. But no, seriously, super smart guy, polyglot of all polyglots. So he was given an opportunity to shape a new product for the company as a principal engineer, and like principal engineer / architect. And what do you think? He has built it in such a complicated way. And by the way, he has built it in Scala, which only a few people knew in the company, that no one could maintain it at all. And you would ask me why the business didn't catch him and catch this decision beforehand, before he has built it and said to build in a way that can be easily maintainable. Well, that's the thing. Like, he was so smart that he managed to convince all non-technical people that this is like the coolest way. Like, this is the most innovative, technologically right way. And believe me, like, he was so technically strong that it wasn't an issue for him. And plus, he also offered different code katas and training sessions for other engineers to learn Scala. So he managed to interest other people to learn this language, but which is great, right? But that's not the problem. The problem is that the way he has built the software wasn't maintainable. The problem was very simple, but the way he solved this problem was very, very complicated. So at some point, after a few years, he has left the company and no one could extend this software. I mean, it probably was working in a very smart way, but it wasn't great for the business because it wasn't necessarily a requirement from the business to make it super innovative. It was more about solving a specific problem. So what we had to do was actually completely bin that piece of software and ask another team to build it. And you know what? Again, great example. We basically got a team of junior mid engineers, and they managed to release this product in a few weeks, and it did the same job. I'm not saying it was as clean as that solution, but for the business, it did the job. So going back to the value, who actually added more value to the business? Who made bigger impact? A person who is absolute genius in technology, who had any answer on any technical question, or junior engineer who managed to solve the problem in a much simpler way without adding all that complexity. So talking about the risk, when I hire, I ask myself, how likely this candidate can overcomplicate solution and make things even worse? The next bit is diversity. Diversity of thought is the key here, and that's probably what I want to kind of mention here. And probably main benefit of being a polyglot is knowing different aspects of programming languages and having experience working with different technologies, which is great. But there is one caveat there. How do you make sure that all that knowledge does not confuse you? And again, distract from focusing on solving a business problem. So again, every time I hire, I look for people who would have that attitude of open discussion, sharing experience and knowledge as well, and taking any ideas on the board, because at the end of the day, you're building this, the software as a team. You usually don't build that as a silo. And usually polyglots, having so much different knowledge, they're very strongly opinionated specific because of that. So it's very important if you're a polyglot, which again, the whole point of this conversation is not to say polyglot is a bad thing, and I will definitely mention that later on. It's more about attitude. How do you use that knowledge? So the next bit is sustainability. So this is something we've kind of pointed out previously. When we hire, we have a real need of resource, unless you're not like very smart in hiring and just want to hit some random numbers of heads in the company. So we expect that every hire will be a sustainable resource. We don't expect them to deliver a project in a month and disappear or become super lazy and not motivated. Again, as I said, for project-based stuff, we have contractors. And as product evolves, you want your hires to evolve as well. And usually people who want to know everything, they lose focus and they become bored about working on the one product, which again makes it very difficult for line managers and for the business to put these people into right teams and the right projects, because it's always not going to be enough. The next bit is self-efficiency. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we expect people to work on their own. No, it's more about like, it's more was a learning from that experience with that Scala software I had. Can I rely on a candidate not just working on their own, but also be pragmatic, be transparent, and have ability to receive feedback? And that's probably one of the key attitudes that we would expect from people, no matter whether they pick more of like problem solving kind of pattern and thought process, or they're more polyglot. And last but not the least is obviously fun. Again, this is not related to the whole polyglot versus problem solve issue. Just wanted to raise it so that everyone knows we're in 2020. We don't hire robots. We talk about culture, about diversity, about work-life balance. So it's super important to hire people who know how to work and know how to have fun. So kind of the final thoughts on the whole polyglot versus problem solving. Both are good, but polyglot attitude is great when you start exploring the world of IT, because it really helps you to be motivated and to find those new bits, new technologies, try new things, and get that very high level view on how the world of IT works, and build that level of confidence so that you can focus more on, okay, now I understand the tech. How can I solve problems? That's why it kind of becomes more of a bottleneck later in the career, as there is very limited amount of things you can learn. And we have to face the fact you can't be like, that's why, again, I don't like a term full stack engineer. Maybe I was okay with this term 10 years ago. I am not that okay with this term now, because the world of, for example, front-end engineering is a massive. The world of back-end engineering is not small. It's as massive as front-end one is, and it's just unreal to know both and be real specialists in both. Then you go into infrastructure, and now we have the whole DevOps culture, which kind of helps you to combine infrastructure and code, but still going completely on infrastructure side of things. Again, there is a massive amount of technologies that you would need to learn to become a true specialist. And the market is massive nowadays. Every engineer needs to understand that, considering the saturation of the market nowadays, you have to be a specialist in a specific area to be a very valuable asset. And probably my main sentence of this presentation before we go to questions is, you should focus more on the outcome of your knowledge, not on the amount of it. I mean, I can read millions of books, but how am I going to use that knowledge from those books? Same here. Like, if I know 20 programming languages, will it help me to solve a problem? If I know how to solve problems, then yes. If I don't, then probably not. Which means you're going to spend so much time learning those technologies, learning those programming languages, but not having experience of how to use those, and you need time for that experience as well, will just make it a bit of a waste of a time. And the last bit I wanted to say before we go to questions, and I think is the most important one, I may be completely wrong here. This is purely my thoughts. This is purely from my experience. I am not trying to convince anyone to be either a polyglot or problem solver. And probably that's not the point of this webinar. It's just to share our opinions, share our experience. And from my experience working in small and big companies and working as line manager, where I hire people, well, nearly every day now, I see some patterns which I just want to share with you. And again, as being a complete polyglot, when I was I was very very proud of knowing around 7, 8 programming languages, then realized that probably knowing one but being really good at it would help me to grow in my career even quicker. Thank you. I should have dropped the mic now, not beforehand, so I completely messed up the animation.
We'll do it anyway. Thanks a lot, Dmitry. Really insightful talk there. It's good to know that it's across multiple businesses where having these kind of pain points as well. So no, really thanks a lot for that. So as mentioned, we are going to go on to questions now. Just going to do a quick screen switch. There we go. So I've had quite a few questions come in. The one that seems to be the most popular at the top. If devs must pick up new languages quickly, will companies be looking for experts in a breadth of languages, or instead look for great developers who can adapt?
Okay, so first of all, I don't think devs must pick up new languages quickly. I think it's all about developers actually finding out what do they like. You know, like I generally think that engineering as a whole requires passion. And by passion, I don't mean working 24/7, because we can talk about burnout for another few hours. I'm happy to, but probably you want to grab some beer sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think you should pick what really makes you passionate. If you love backend engineering, pick a language that fits you most, and you will find the market, right? Again, the world is now so much into technology that whichever language you're going to pick, you're going to find a massive market. Like, again, great example. I have always been into kind of Java, PHP world. And since I joined Moonpig, it was first time I was managing .NET teams. And it was a great example when, before I joined Moonpig, I was like, oh wow, I probably .NET market is slowed down now, because like there are so many languages. I haven't heard anyone coding in .NET, so probably it's a dead language now. And then when I actually joined Moonpig, I realized that there is a massive market with .NET engineering, like a lot of companies using .NET, and it's evolving and evolving. There are a lot of contribution into it. So whatever you're going to pick, you're going to find a market. Probably if you're going to pick some Pascal, which is not used anymore, it's probably going to be a bit of a struggle for you to find a market, but you're still going to find a market. I'm pretty much sure you're even going to find a market for Pascal development. So on the other side of the question is around great developers who can adapt. I think this is a very important one, and I think every engineer needs to be able to adapt, but not necessarily to technology and to programming languages, but to adapt the way we solve problems. A few years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, we're all into kind of API architectures, and the way we kind of create microservices, and the microservice buzzword was everywhere, even in non-technology world. But now we kind of moved into event-driven architecture, where we use queues and topics to talk between services. Now we moved into serverless architecture, and it didn't necessarily change the languages, right? You can write lambdas in same .NET Core. You can write in C#. You can write in Java, Node.js, whatever you pick. So it didn't change the language itself. The technology does change. And yes, every engineer needs to be able to adapt. But if you're going to be looking at adapting to technologies, it's going to make it much easier for you, rather than just trying to learn all the languages, all the technologies. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what you mentioned about the big variety there. So yeah, I guess in terms of next question, I mean, big one that I know I've come across quite a bit when speaking to developers over the past few weeks is, at what point do you consider someone a polyglot developer, I should say?
Yeah, so I've kind of mentioned that in the presentation on my last slide around you should focus more on the outcome of your knowledge and not just the amount of it. And probably that's the key here. Like there is no tick box. There is not a tick box exercise that would make you a polyglot. You know that you probably won't find just like a Facebook game where you just pick the answers on questions like a test questionnaire and it will tell you you're a polyglot or not. I think it's just about the attitude. Like if your attitude is about knowing as many technologies and as many languages, as many data storages as possible, that probably creates a polyglot mindset in yourself. Whereas if you think about what do I need to learn to solve specific business problems, that will create a problem-solving mindset. And that's probably the key difference. You may end up realizing you've learned a lot of technologies and a lot of programming languages with the mindset of, hey, all these things will help me solve problems. But as soon as you still kind of attach a solution and attach a problem before you pick the technology you're learning, that's probably the key difference.
Awesome. And yeah, I guess moving on, getting quite a few more questions coming in now. So I guess, how have you dealt with the changing language trends when managing your teams? And I guess not just at Moonpig, but throughout your career.
Yeah, so when I worked in started at rental cars, I was actually very much into a PHP ecosystem. And at some point when we realized we're going to be joining joint company with Booking.com, we moved to more kind of Java stack, and it also made sense just because of the scalability and just to create a same technical defaults in the company. Again, you know, it's very up to the business and up to people. Like making a change in a company is usually a very rare thing. Usually when a company picks a language, they stick to it till whenever. There are probably only few companies that have completely changed languages, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Like when you hire 100 engineers in a company who are Java engineers, you can't change the language in a company to .NET just because you're not going to fire those 100 people, and you're not going to teach them from Java to .NET. First of all, it doesn't make any sense, and secondly, people probably won't going to take that opportunity because that's a massive learning curve. So how do I react on this? I would probably be a bit confused because I wouldn't understand the reason behind it. If there would be a very good reason, then we would just need to put a very good plan on how we would deliver that, and obviously work with people to understand how they would take it. Because at the end of the day, for the business doesn't really care which language you're going to be writing with. Business needs problems to be solved.
Yes, I guess it's very much results driven from the top down with it. So it is finding the best language for the job rather than. You mentioned earlier about the innovative developer that you spoke about. I guess just a quick one from me on that. How do you deal with developers like that, where they're looking to be really innovative, work on the sexy new tech, but obviously you've got deadlines, you've got projects to do. How's that works in your teams?
Well, first of all, a lot of herbal tea. just to calm them down. But yeah, seriously, it is difficult. So you always need to keep them motivated, but you need to make sure that they don't waste their energy on too many things. So you usually end up giving them a very solid kind of nearly like their own roadmap that they can stick to, because then they know exactly what they need to achieve today, tomorrow, and it's always about stretch goals as well. So I love objectives framework in companies, because it not only helps the business grow even quicker and accelerate the delivery, but it also helps people to grow. And when you set objectives, there are many ways, many frameworks how you set objectives. But I very like the stretch objective framework, where you don't only set the 100% like the red green flag kind of objective, where you go and say, yes, you did achieve objective, or you haven't achieved objective. I like the 0.5, 0.7, 1.0 objectives. Probably not very much into the topic, but yeah, the 0.5 is this red green flag. Have you achieved objective or not? Then the 0.7 is what is your stretch target. So you always need to kind of your goal should be the 0.7, even though you know that on the paper you will achieve your objective if you meet the 0.5 goal. The 0.7 is your stretch goal, and 1.0 is your kind of dream goal. So this just helps people to route their kind of implementation to reach the goal in the right direction. Because, you know, if I want to build, I don't know, a Golf, or I want to build a car, and my 0.5 is I need to have a steering wheel and 5 wheels, that's my 0.5, because the car will be driving from a hill at least, you know, and I can even steer it, which is great. Then 0.7 will be an example of some real car, which would be my stretch objective that I still can achieve, but probably I need to put a lot of effort in it. And then 1.0 is my Lamborghini, right? Like I want to dream to build a Lamborghini. And if I will always dream about building a Lamborghini, my trajectory of getting to my 0.5 and 0.7 will always be with a mindset of Lamborghini. So that helps me to motivate myself, and also helps me to achieve those goals in the best ways I can. And that's kind of the approach I take with those super active, like highly performing candidates and people.
That's definitely good. I guess so just moving on to a couple of other, I think I had a couple of points as well on the questions. So first one then, motivation wise, I guess, what your thoughts be on like getting a job in a good company but in a language you need to learn, or okay company with a language you're good at? So I guess how's your preference been on that?
Okay, first of all, you need to define for yourself what do you mean by good company and okay company?
So I'm guessing from their sides they might mean like big brand company, like everyone's got a couple of dream companies that they want to work for. So using a football analogy, maybe looking to join City or joining Burnley. But
yeah, so I kind of get that, but it's you need to understand one thing, that you can work for a massive company, very highly big company on the market, but solve some very basic problems. And when you're going to go to an interview and you'll have a line in the CV that you work for this company, obviously people will ask you, what exactly have you done in that company? And if the only story you would be able to tell that you've solved a very small problem in that company, I would better recommend going for a company where you're going to be solving interesting, challenging problems. It may be a smaller company, it may be not such a highly reputative company on the market, but you will have a story behind it. Because when people come to an interview, I ask them for a story. I don't just read the first line of a company name. I always ask, what exactly have you done there? You know, because even like senior engineers and like principal engineers and architects, depending on problems that we hire them, depending on what kind of problems they solved, not necessarily what companies they worked for. So going back to this question, I would always ask yourself what exactly what problems I'm going to be solving. And you can be very transparent and ask this question to a hiring manager in that company, because they usually know in which team you're going to be joining. So it's a fair question for you to ask what kind of problems you're going to be solving. So I would start with that. And then based on the answer, I would ask myself, would I enjoy it? Because you spend a lot of time at work and you want to have a story behind all the work you do.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a really good point there. To first, Stephen has just come up with a couple of questions here. Let's go with the bottom one. Like, under risk, have good Polyglot developers tended to expect a higher salary than other developers? I guess from your experience, and I guess also would that affect your hiring of them with the risk that they obviously are at a higher salary but have a bit more variety?
To be honest, I have a lot of examples where I said no to Polyglot candidates at all. Not even hiring them and giving them better salaries. I just disqualified them from the pipeline because they were too spread in technologies. Like they wouldn't be able to be confident in one, but they could answer me questions about all of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I probably never seen an example where Polyglot developers would get higher salaries, because again, businesses get money for solving problems for their customers, and they pay salaries for people who solve problems and not necessarily know everything.
That's definitely fair. Definitely a fair point there. It's a bit of an interesting one. Interesting to see your points and here. Whoever anonymous was, hello. Manager got suspicious after he learned that he started working on a Python project while they don't use it at all. I guess on that, I guess it's probably more on the R&D within your team. I don't know what your thoughts would be if you found that someone was learning different languages on with this one, Python. Would you support them on that, or I guess help them join work to, I guess, gain those skills?
Absolutely. I mean, again, there is a difference between you just learning another language or you constantly changing the trajectory of your focus. If any of my, and to be honest, it's not like if most of my engineers, they tend to learn technologies we don't use in company, and the only thing I ask them is to do some show and tells on some most exciting things, because that's cool. I mean, like, we all learn new things, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't mean by polyglot of, like, I don't mean that if you learn another second language, you're a polyglot straight away and you should be fired. All I'm saying is that attitude. Like, if you learn Python, that's great. I generally speaking think that if you want to kind of grow yourself as a very strong engineer, I would generally speaking recommend every engineer to learn one object-oriented programming language and one functional language. So that's already two, right? and to be honest, that's already a lot. Like, learning two languages, especially one object-oriented and one functional language, is a hard thing to do on its own. So But yeah, I would support, and I do support all the time people learning new stuff.
No, so it sounds good. I guess just a couple more questions left. I hope we've all got plenty of time there. I'll cover this one actually because it's an interesting topic. Many recruiters think all devs should know many languages. You mentioned that architecture, front end, back end within a full stack engineer role. I guess that also, I don't know your opinion on this, but it also comes from the contact with the hiring manager, what they're actually looking for these projects. You can have every kind of tech under the sun on a job spec, for example, but there's probably only key parts of it that you'd be using. How would you find that?
I think I feel shame when I see these kind of job specs, and I think if you see a job spec, you should basically know only one thing: this company doesn't know what they want, or there is a massive communication between hiring manager and recruiter. So there's never the case when any company, well, probably like a startup company, when they have like 3 engineers and they are building mobile apps, front end, back end, infrastructure, etc., they would look for people who know everything. That's probably the only case when that would work. In any other, but again, working for a startup is fun but very risky as well. So if you go to any, not even like enterprise, I'm talking any stable company that has been on the market for some time, they already have products, and products have multiple teams, and teams consist of different diverse skills already. So every hiring manager would know exactly who they're hiring.
Yeah. So really good to understand. I think you're right, especially in that communication between the hiring manager as well, what they're actually looking for on the kind of roles. I guess final couple of questions that I'm guessing it means hiring manager. First of all, like to move from .NET Java to Python functional programming. I guess have you been involved in those kind of language shifts?
So generally speaking, and I'm gonna repeat myself, every language fits for its own problem, and you can't solve all the problems with one language. And that's probably the approach we take. And yeah, we're probably not gonna take HR managers because they're not technical, so they wouldn't be able to make that decision. But as a hiring manager, when I decide I'm gonna hire new engineers, first of all, I already have a plan. I know exactly which team I'm gonna be hiring for. I know exactly what they're gonna be building. But when we plan the new project, we may consider new programming languages or new technologies because, for example, we start moving to serverless. By the way, this is just completely made up example. It's not Moonpig one. We're already fully serverless, and I'm not. Should I market Moonpig? Yes, of course we do hire. But no, the whole point is, you know, if for example you are purely just cloud-based, not serverless business, and you decide to move more to serverless world, you would obviously start looking into serverless infrastructures. Let's say you go into AWS, you start looking into languages that can be used to build lambdas. Then you start looking into pros and cons of each language in building lambdas, and you realize the cold start issues. Then you kind of align all that knowledge to the business requirements you have for that specific project, and that helps you make a decision. And sometimes that decision ends up with the fact that you will change the language for that specific problem. You're not going to change the whole language stack and all the technical defaults in the whole company, but you may start using new language for that specific problem. So, for example, even at Moonpig, even though our kind of core language base is .NET, we write all our lambdas in Node. Well, most of our lambdas in Node. So because we get a lot of benefit of doing that instead of writing it in .NET Core. But don't get me wrong, we still have some lambdas in .NET Core, just because, again, it does make total sense to write it in Node.js, and we may consider in future to write all the lambdas in Node.js. But the first decision we made, we need to get some people and start building lambdas because we want to move to serverless architecture ASAP to try it out. And we'd not have opportunity at that time to make those decisions of changing languages. But now when we are using more and more of serverless, we've realized that actually building those in Node makes more sense. So we are making that change.
No, that's good. I guess, well, final question, and it sounds got a final point there. I guess I think you touched on it earlier about looking for polyglot developers. I know you mentioned you had a few where you pretty much end up rejecting for various reasons. I mean, has this been adapted across other companies that you know, like the search for that green polyglot?
Every company I worked for, maybe, again, as I said previously, I may be completely wrong on everything I've said today, but in all the companies I worked for, our main thought process when we hire was, can this candidate solve problems? We were not expecting polyglots from, like, polyglot attitude from any candidate at all. And as I said previously, we would expect people to come to an interview and say, what problems are you solving? I can solve these problems. And give us examples of them solving similar problems in the past. And like my point on engineering and like kind of engineering as a whole is that 80%, what makes a good engineer? From my perspective, 80% of a good engineer make his ability to solve problems, and only 20% is writing code. Because 80% of the time, an engineer is thinking about the problem, not writing the code, and only 20% kind of engineer writes code. So, and that's the same attitude when I hire people. I expect them to be very good at those 80%, and then those 20% could be okay-ish because you can skill that out.
No, definitely interesting point with that. And I guess a final one, I appreciate more of a comment, but I guess it's quite true. All become polyglot developers if you stay in the industry long enough. I've seen it quite a lot of people that I speak to where they're constantly upskilled or learning new tech to keep up with the times. Guys, put this question, mentioned about the next best thing. I guess on your side, actually, what would you consider is going to be like the next big language or tech that people are going to want to work on?
Okay, so first of all, on this one, as I probably already said, I don't believe there is a black and white view on polyglot and / problem solving people. It's all about attitude. So if you've been upskilling yourself for 35 years and obviously learning new skills and maybe new languages, it doesn't necessarily make you a polyglot because you've been learning all those new skills to solve specific business problems. Answering your question on what is going to be the next big thing and what's going to be the next like language that can be used, I don't think languages are going to change. I mean, they're going to be more simplified. We're gonna have a lot of frameworks that do a lot of stuff for us. We can see that in the last 10 years, like we've seen a lot of high-level programming languages evolve massively and making developers' lives much easier. We can clearly see that comparing the AI and machine learning from 10 years ago and now, there's a massive difference, right? Like 10 years ago, you would at least need to have a doctorate degree in maths to do any machine learning. Whereas now I can build my own neural networks knowing zero from maths. Like there are libraries, there are frameworks, there are tools that help you build that easily and seamlessly. So the next big thing probably is technology, not language itself. Like we can see a massive increase in like serverless architecture mindset. I think event-driven architecture, even though it's not new, I think we are going to be using that more and more and more because the market is growing, the traffic is growing. So having the synchronous mindset doesn't work anymore. I mean, it does work, but it requires a lot of resources. So you can scale up much more if you start looking asynchronous, if you start thinking asynchronously. For some specific, and especially now with serverless architecture, I think generally like functional programming is going to be a thing as well. And I definitely see the trend. But yeah, language-wise, I don't think so. I like we see the same languages on the market as we've seen 10, 15, 20 years ago. The technology has changed. Languages haven't. Like they are evolving, but languages themselves haven't changed a lot.
That's good. Really good insight there, and that is the end of the questions. Just wanted to, well, first of all, thank you to Dmitry for running this evening, I should say. I realise it's nearly 7 o'clock, so thanks to everyone for sticking around as well. As mentioned earlier, I'm really keen to get as much feedback as possible from yourselves, anything that we can do. There will be a quick feedback form afterwards once I sign out of this. But in the meantime, thanks a lot, Dmitry, for that. Really appreciate you. And I hope everyone's enjoyed it.
Cool. Cheers, everyone. Hope you found it useful.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
See ya.
See ya.